When you create a diagram based on one of the templates, as we did, we chose Basic Flowchart, you're given stencils on the left-hand side that are relevant to that type of diagram. But every now and then we want to add additional stencils. To add additional stencils, go for the More Shapes option, and particularly the triangle to the right. When you go the triangle to the right, you've got a number of categories like Business, Flowchart, General, Maps, Network, etc. Let's say we went for maps and floor plans, and I might go for building plan. What you can ask for example, is office equipment, and I would go for this particular stencil. When I click this option, I now have an extra stencil, which is the office equipment stencil, and I can add things like telephones and printers and PCs to my diagram simply by dragging. If I want to add more stencils, additional stencils, I'll go to More Shapes, and I'll go to any of these particular stencils. So I might add, just because I can, General, and I might go for blocks metric. And so now I've got another stencil. So you can add as many stencils as you like. And you just move between your stencils using these scroll bars. You can also resize so that you can see the stencils more easily. You can reduce and increase the height. And you just click on whichever particular stencil you want to view and just add the shapes accordingly. So that's how you switch between your stencils, and that's how you add additional stencils. Now the other thing you can do is you can right click the name of a stencil. So let's go back to, say, Basic Flowchart Shapes, which we're now familiar with. If I right click, I can actually ask to view my stencils in a variety of ways. At the moment I'm seeing icons and names, but I might ask to see the names under the icons, and so this is what it gives me. If I right click again on Basic Flowchart Shapes and go back to View, I can see Icons Only, right click, View, Names Only, right click, View, or Icons and Details, which gives me a lot of detail about the shape. But I'm just going to take it back to the default, which is Icons and Names. So you can also view and manipulate your stencils in a variety of ways. Now what's really handy is to create your own stencils. It sometimes becomes difficult when you use a number of shapes that come from a variety of stencils to have to keep bringing those stencils up. What I like to do is create my own stencil which has all the shapes that I use for a particular type of diagram. So to create my own stencil, a new stencil, I'm going back to More Shapes and I'll choose a new stencil. And here it is here. The red asterisk tells me that basically this hasn't been saved. So what I can do now is I can drag things to the stencil to start populating the stencil with various shapes. If in the office equipment stencil I use PC, I use printer, and I use keyboard, I'll just add to my diagram the sorts of things I do use. Overhead projector, oh no, just projector. So maybe these 4 shapes I use out of that stencil, and then I'll go back to my stencil and I'll drag them in and I'll add them to my stencil. What I can then do is give them a name. So if I right click this particular one here, I can actually edit the master and the master properties. What I'll then call it instead of master 2 is I'll call it PC. And OK. I can right click this one, for example, go into the master and edit the master properties and call it keyboard. And OK. And if I go into here, I can go into its master properties and call it printer. And you can give them specific names to help you. In this one here, I'll edit the master to say projector. I may then want to grab some other shapes, so I might go to Basic Flowchart Shapes, add the document shape to my diagram, add the database shape to my diagram, and then go back to my stencil. I'll then add the document to my stencil and add the database to my stencil. If I right click this master and edit the master and master properties, I can tell it to change this to document. Right click this one, edit the master properties to say database. And so basically I create my own stencil with my own shapes, and I just arrange them and give them names that make sense to me, just by dragging. If I then want to save this stencil, I hit this little save button here. When I click the save button, Visio wants to save this file as a VSS file, which I can then call up and share with others. I might save it to my desktop, and I'll just call it Kathy's Stencil. And save. And so now I have a stencil called Kathy's Stencil. If I was to close this stencil, simply by right-clicking and choosing Close, whenever I need that stencil, I can just hit More Shapes, I can open a stencil, and I can go and get it off my desktop. And there it is there. And I can email and share that particular stencils with others in my group when we all create the same sort of diagrams. And this means that we've got all the types of shapes that we regularly use in one stencil that's customized for us.